I say I have to do all my own technology and everything. I don't have a communications person.
Now that we on recording, I'm not comment on it.
Well, thank you, Shennell, for joining us today, joining me today, rather. I really appreciate it. And just wanted to thank you also for being willing to accept the honor of being one of our children's champion, you and the trust, and representing the trust in that. And so just tell me a little bit about your work and what inspires you.
So I am the Senior Program Officer of KB Reynolds Charitable Trust, and I am over our local impact. So that means that I am in charge of the investments that we make here in Forsyth County. And part of what I do is really get a chance to elevate and support organizations in our community that are working to ensure that all residents in Forsyth County have an opportunity for economic mobility and a place to live, work, and thrive. And I think the thing that inspires me is the work that we're able to do around really elevating equity, doing systems change work. I've worked in nonprofits for a long time. I'm a native of Forsyth County, and being a part of disrupting systems that continue to keep certain people, at the bottom, as we continue to hear these statistics that say that children born in poverty in Forsyth County are less likely to ever be able to move out of poverty. That's something that I hold with me because I think about my children. I think about friends and their children, and I want for our community the same things that my children have had: an opportunity to thrive, to have an equitable, culturally competent education, and be able to make our community better. And so I'm inspired by the work that we're doing to make sure that we are doing our part in that.
Yeah, I think y'all have done a great job. And one thing that, Dr. Gerald says, and you both say, is that, we can't program our way out of our challenges. And so just trying to figure out, how we really make a difference and make a change with the work that we're doing. And that's something that we've been talking about at our agency as well. What can we do that will really make a difference? And, instead of just doing little things, how can we really make a change? So I think the trust has inspired all of us to think about how we do things differently.
Well, I'm inspired by the work that you all, were able to lead around the FFN policy analysis. Those are the things that really make the difference when we come to understand what systems and policies are we working against, and how do we elevate the build the will to make sure that people really know why is this problematic. So I appreciate the work that you and your team did to get us to this policy analysis, so we know what we're working against, and can really build a bridge around how do we help to support this.
Right. Families and children. So what do you think has been the proudest moment in your career regarding children, families, or even early education in general?
So first of all, I've been at the trust just shy of 3 years. I think at the time you all run this video, I would have just hit my 3-year mark. And coming into the trust, the Great Expectations Special Initiative was halfway in our 10-year, mark. And I think it was really intimidating because the goals and strategies had already been set. They were very audacious goals. I remember hearing when Great Expectations, was first launched. I think the thing that I'm proudest of is to help reset the table of who was sitting in these spaces leading this work. I believe that in order for us to do the work, we have to ensure that those who are most impacted by the challenges we're seeking to solve are a part of the conversations. And so creating spaces that institutions were receptive to say, listen, if we say that we really want to ensure that all children arrive at kindergarten ready to learn, where are the voices that represents the most marginalized, communities? So where are our Black leaders in this work? Where are our grassroots leaders in this work? Where are the representatives that are speaking on behalf of our non-English speaking families and children? And so watching how the Pre-K Steering Committee has evolved and how they embrace that shift has been amazing. And then I think just watching the partners come together even to apply for that large ARPA grant and see that be successful really shows what happens when we can come together, stop working in silos, really build out trust and, create partnerships that work. And it's not about one organization leading or taking responsibility, but really creating a system that, we're going to be able to take some data and learn a lot around these 30 classrooms that we are working with. So I think it's setting the table, like just creating a different table around who's leading this work.
Yeah, that is so true, because it took us a while to get to this point. And so I think that little push from you and from the trust really helped us rethink how we were approaching the work. And hopefully, we will do a good job with the pre-K priority, trying to figure out how we are really serving children and families with that effort. So
Yeah.
exciting.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was
No,
going to say
you're fine.
that I recognize that, we've had some partners like Child Care Resource Center. You all have been at the table since, the beginning. And systems change work takes a lot of time. It's not something that everybody is being, everybody's not being compensated for all parts of the work. So, your expertise that you bring to it and just being willing to stay in it because you see, this is where we're going and this is how we get there. And we can't do this work without all of our partners coming to the table. So we appreciate you and some of those lifetimers almost that have been in it since inception. We've seen a lot of changes in leadership in our early childhood space, but we're grateful for those of you who bring that historical data to us and help us, as we're coming in to say, how did we get here? What happened in this space really helps us continue to grow too.
Yeah, I think it's, passion. We were talking about that the other day at the office, met with a couple of staff just to see where they were, in terms, because we've had people who've been with us for 20 years plus as well. And so, just trying to figure out, what do you need? Are you okay? You're not going to leave us, trying to retain people. And, it really does take passionate people, committed people to make the change. And, it's good to have people who this is what they want to do with their life and they're excited about helping children and families. So who has inspired you throughout your career? It could be a person, it could be, just something famous, local.
So I would say, I think two things, I don't think I can pick one particular thing, but I think two things, as I said, I spent, the early part of my career working in another nonprofit where I did a lot of work around asset poverty, financial management capabilities. And I remember going to Prosperity Now, which is a national cohort of folks who work around asset poverty and those things. And the first conversation that I heard from a young man named Diedrich, he was talking about the benefits cliff and asset poverty. And he also was talking about the racial wealth gap. And it was like a light bulb went off to me to help me understand how we can continue to do programs and we not necessarily see outcomes. So we could do a program and we could get people to save $1,000, but every 6 months there was some type of crisis that was coming in. $1,000 was being, erased. And it was like you would see one group of people and they're moving quickly ahead, and then other people that could never seem to get their bearings. And so the education that I got to really understand, what were the intentional policies and things that had happened across generations that left the populations of people that I was trying to support, like what left them kind of behind the mark. And as we started to understand, like what is equity, what is liberation, it gave me a different sense of who are we holding accountable for this. And so I think one, that education and that interaction I had with Prosperity Now. And I think the other persons that I would say that have inspired me would have to be my children. And, my husband and I were young parents. We just put our head down and we were like, we know that it's going to take education for our children to be successful. That means that we have to be involved. I made a decision to continue to work in a job where I was not necessarily making the most money, but it was a job that allowed me the flexibility to be, in my children's classrooms to support them how they needed to be. But I had such a vision for what life would look like for our children. And it wasn't necessarily about money. I mean, I wanted them to have good jobs. I wanted them to do well financially. but I wanted them to have a sense of belonging. I wanted them to know that they had parents who would accept them. I wanted them to know that they had parents that would advocate for them.
Mhm.
And, I think across the spectrum, I've had, my youngest daughter was the child who would call the news room to the schools if something wasn't going right. And so, she was an advocate really early on. I remember, she had me marching around downtown talking about gun violence when she was 14 and 15 years old. I didn't
Mhm.
necessarily, want to be out here in a rally. I'm like, that's scary. Police might come. We might get in trouble. But
Mhm.
my daughter pushed me to say, we got to get in the fight. Y'all can't just sit here and let things happen and nobody does anything. And my children have, they challenge me. They challenge what have been my traditions and my philosophies. They ask the questions about why. Um, and so they make me want to be a better person. And I get to look at what they've been able to accomplish. And I want that for everybody. I want the people that I pass in the grocery store to say that their children are doing well too. And so, I think what we've been able to give our kids, I just want to see that happen for so many kids in Forsyth County.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. Raising children, I have 3 children of my own. And so, you want them to be people of good character. You want them to really value things other than just money, but value things that are important and that will make a difference. And so I get that completely. Um, just trying to, I think that's your real legacy,
Right.
the children that you raise and the people that they turn out to be. And you can't always control it, but you can do your best and try to ensure that they have everything that they need. So
Yeah. I
I
think the
agree.
greatest compliment I got was when my daughter graduated from college and one of her friends had come to say goodbye. And she said,
Mhm.
Miss Shennell, you raised an amazing human. And it,
Oh.
I mean, literally almost brought tears to my eyes that her peers would see, we love our kids. We think they're amazing.
Mhm.
But for her friend to say, like, you did a good job. She's a really good person. And I think that that's what people say about all of our children.
Mhm.
They're out here making their impact in the world, and I'm really proud of them.
Right, right. That's great. So, what do you love most about the work that you do in the community? You talked a little bit about being from Winston, making a difference. And so I don't know if you can pick out one thing that you love the most or if it's everything, but just share a little bit about what you're doing.
So I think in this role, Katura, what I have found that I really enjoy the most is being able to level the playing field.
Mm,
It's been depending on who you ask, we are the city of arts and innovation, but it's not for all.
right.
Depending on which way you come into our city, you get a different view. And so being able to work with leaders that are across 52 that have often been ostracized and not had the resources that they need,
Mhm.
it's fulfilling to be able to support an organization who has had to exist on bare bones and
Mhm.
really see the trajectory of what those investments do for those particular organizations. $100,000 when you're used to working on 30 really means that, there's an ED that's getting some capacity to help support them so they can do the work. So they don't have to be the executive director, the CFO, the
Mhm.
after school teacher, the social media. They actually can build the capacity to do the work that needs to happen. And oftentimes in Winston, it really seems to be a who you know. And so being able to tear down some of those walls to say that, at the trust, if your strategy aligns with the systems that we're trying to shift, come in and let's talk about it. And so, just having people say, I've never applied for a grant at the trust. I didn't know that we could do that is amazing to me. Our portfolio has changed. The
Mhm.
grants have changed. We have had some considerable investments into the grassroots organizations over the last 3 years. And I'm really, really proud of that.
Mhm. Yeah, and some people have a hard time with that, but I think until, we help the smaller organizations figure out, how to make a difference and how they can be better resourced, then we just gonna keep having the same issues over and over again. So
Right. And it
yeah.
is different. I think it is different when organizations have been
Mhm.
used to having a lot of support from the trust. And, one thing about it is our investment levels don't typically change. I have about $5.6 million every year. So
Mhm.
if we are being intentional about making more investments into grassroots organizations, then that means that someone has to be willing to either say that we have been able to find ways to get other funding or
Mm-hmm.
we have to make the decision of where we're going to cut from it, because the dollars, unfortunately, we don't get to increase the dollars. And so we
Right.
are making some hard changes. And I appreciate you for saying, like, we're seeing the difference, because when we bring everybody to the table, we hope to get to some solutions a lot faster.
Mm-hmm. Well, and some organizations are really the grassroots, they're really touching
Mhm.
um, families in a different way. Our organization works with families, at a higher level, and there are other organizations that are really in there digging in, making that difference, just on a daily basis. And I think we do that too, but it's just that, ours is just that childcare focus and not the holistic family issues. I was reading an article this morning about the mom that killed her 3 children and committed suicide. And I was like, wow, where did we as a community fail her and
Mhm.
her family? And what could be done differently. And I know people have mental health issues, but it seems like, some way, somehow we should be able to keep those things from happening, with families and children, especially a young mom like that with 3 kids. That was just sad to me,
Yeah.
to read that this morning.
Yeah, definitely heartbreaking. And here, last night is that hit the breaking news yesterday afternoon.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So you talked a little bit about challenges that we're facing in Winston. Is there anything in particular related to early education, um, ideas to stabilize or change how we are supporting children in this area, or supporting families, or even childcare professionals?
So I think you asked 5 questions in that one question. So I'm
Sorry, you can pick one.
so I think that the biggest challenge that we are facing in education at large is how do we care for the profession?
Hmm.
Because education without educators isn't going to work.
Right.
So I think in early childhood, one of our biggest challenges is how do we even build up a next generation of early childhood providers when the first thing that they hear is early childhood providers are working jobs where they don't get access to benefits, or, they're being paid lower wages. If those wages are comparable to, someone who's working in fast food, what is the benefit of needing to be caring for somebody's children? You have to take somebody's child's life into your hands and care for them and keep them safe and educate them at the same wage by which you could potentially make a hamburger.
Hmm.
How do we say that we value children if we don't value the people who we need to educate and keep them safe? So I think that's the first, is just the workforce, and
Hmm.
how do we show teachers that we support them. And I think the other thing is, what does that mean? Not only, in terms of the wages that they're making, but the support. When we hear about early childhood educators not even having access to a place for their own children to go while they're caring for children.
Hmm.
So even, when we think about like our public schools, ensuring that, parents who are teachers have access to the things that they need so that they can care for other children and their children be well. I think when we think about it in terms of stabilization, I think, building a pipeline. And so, we are seeing some of that happening when some of our schools around the early childhood pipelines, getting young children interested in, this process early on. But I think, we really are going to have to just do a better job of making education, one, profitable for the people who have to teach, because you shouldn't have to be broke to care for children. Like, that just should not happen.
Hmm.
But the other thing is, like, how do we compete with all the other amazing professions that young people are seeing? You could be a TikToker today and
Hmm.
one viral video and you're famous. And so how do we connect that or combine that or even compete with this notion of instant gratification? How do we make the love of children be something that young people are excited about doing?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the compensation piece, the benefits piece, I think there are probably some teachers who are in the school system who would love to be in a classroom with the younger children, but it just is not, they can't support their families. with the lower wages. And so, I would agree with that 100%, thinking about how we fully compensate. And I was reading an article about, the childcare crisis and just compensation in general. And I thought back and I said, so I started in this work before the 1990s, and this was a challenge. And then, now we're in 2023 and it's still a challenge. And so at some point, we've got to do like other developing countries and really, put our children first, put our families first, and
Right.
figure out how we make that happen. And it's a bigger issue that we could probably solve in our community, but we could start, maybe we can be the model, who knows? Just try
And
to
when we
figure it
say
out.
put education first,
Hmm.
all of the solutions that we
Oh, yeah.
come up with, they cannot exclude the people who are responsible for caring for the children. So, we're coming up with all these other strategies, but the
Right.
strategies do not include pay early childhood educators and all educators
Hmm.
what they're worth.
Right. Right. Agreed. Agreed. So, you talked a little bit about impact and how the trust has impacted the community. Do you have any hopes for the future? How you think about changing Winston-Salem? What you hope to see?
So I think one thing is, we say that we want to see children arrive at kindergarten ready to learn and leave
Hmm.
school prepared to excel in life. And how do we ensure that we are filling the gaps in every space so that that really happens? And so, we start by working with, if children are going to arrive at kindergarten ready to learn, we have to ensure that mothers are making it through pregnancy, delivery, and the first year of birth. So
Hmm.
reducing the infant mortality rates. We also have to make sure that children are making that first year birthday so that infant mortality and maternal mortality rates, we've got to do something about that. So one, I would like to see us really address what are the barriers to that. We've got two amazing projects that are happening in Forsyth County around our infant and maternal mortality rates. And can't wait to see, what's coming out of that initial study and the work that's happening there. But the other thing is also, how do we talk about trauma and adverse childhood experiences and how that impacts a child's ability to arrive at kindergarten ready to learn? And we know that there are lots of social determinants of health that are impacting outcomes, not just for children, but for their families. And so a two-generation approach of how we support children is we start by supporting their families,
Hmm.
helping to, push this conversation around living wages. But more importantly, how do we help to level out that public benefits with, so as families are moving towards earning additional wages, that they are not immediately losing benefits that send them back into this cycle. And then I
Right.
think the other thing is, we spend a lot of time talking about young children, but there is an alarming statistic. And, we look at the news every day, gun violence in Winston-Salem, the number of students who are not in school, mental health, all of those things. So how do we holistically ensure that the child is well? And so it starts, you know, preconception through life, and the ways that I believe the trust helps to support families is helping to fill in those gaps and understand what are the barriers that we really need to be addressing. So less programs, more policies, and really, looking at, how do we bring racial equity into this conversation, that it cannot be the icing, it has to be the ingredient of the cake.
Hmm.
It's not just something we say at the end, but it really has to be at the crux of the work that we're doing.
Right. Yeah, I say all the time, I'm like, so we force children, require, I guess, children to take a driver's license test before they drive a car and have years of practice. And maybe that's something that we should do with parenting. Just think about, is there a class that we can offer in high school that all kids have to take before they can become, parents? And I know you can't control when people have children, or maybe have a teenage pregnancy or something like that. But the majority, I think, would benefit from some type of class that, family life, parenting, something along those lines that really helps them, because not everybody has a family that is functional. you know, that operates in a certain way. Most of us have some dysfunction in our families, even though we try to do the best job we can, but not everybody has that role model that can help them think about how they're raising their children, and how important that is for not only the child's success, but also for, you know, the success of our community. So just trying to figure out, you know, what can we do? Maybe that's a policy change there, Shennell, a requirement.
So I would say that, you know, I tend to always go to the other side of the coin. So, you know, there are some things that we hold individuals accountable for. And so I
Mhm,
think that there are some things that, you know, we could help support.
mhm.
But I also believe that we have to look at our community and say, you know, what are the things that we are seeing? So when we see higher rates of high school dropout, when we see higher rates in some schools of children who are, you know, not coming to school with the skills that they need, because children are expected to be scholars when they arrive at kindergarten.
Right,
Also look and say, what does that community look like? And how is that community different from communities where children are thriving? And oftentimes that's not about individual choices, that's about.
right.
And so, you know, I would always say, like, how do we address the structural racism,
Mhm,
and structural history of a community that has, oftentimes said that based on the way we do work, we have already said that we value some children over others.
mhm,
You know, when we go to different schools, or even let's say we go to the parks, if we look at a park in one part of our community versus the other, how do we tell children that we value them when they don't have a safe place to play?
mhm,
What's acceptable for a playground in 27101 is not acceptable at 27107. You know, they don't have access to the same things. Their playgrounds aren't being cleaned up. You know, parents are talking about finding drug needles and things like that on a
mhm.
playground. I think if we focus on those things, parents, when you have access to
This is
living
true.
wage,
Yeah.
safe places, places that are not, you know, crime ridden, then you have the capacity to show up differently for your child. But if
Mhm,
you're every day having to fight to figure out how I got to get food on the table, I'm living in a place that's got mildew and mold, nobody's holding the landlords accountable, we don't have safe, you know, housing. It's hard to try to figure out, you know, do I have time to be emotionally solvent when I have a conversation with my child. I'm
right.
I'm more likely to be calm when everything else around me is calm. But when my life is chaos, my children get the chaotic mother. And so you know, I tend to always want to say, let me look on the other side and see what we can do to not hold individuals, but talk about the systems and structures that are really playing into that.
And that's 100% correct, because there are systems and structures that have created the challenges that people are facing. I agree with that 100%. So
Yes.
is there anything else that you want to share? I think you talked about a lot, you know, and how the trust is impacting Winston-Salem and Forsyth County. Anything else?
So I think the last thing that I would like to say is, we want to say thank you to, the Child Care Resource Center for recognizing us as a community champion. I have a quote on my desk that says, "It's our privilege to make sure that the community is whole." Someone asked me one day, like, "What would you like to leave?" And I think that when you walk through the doors at the trust, that is the value of what we do. We want to ensure that the community, Forsyth County, and also the state of North Carolina is whole. And
Mm.
however we get to do that, we count it a privilege. So, you know, we're fortunate to have organizations like yours and all the many partners that we get a chance to work with. We get the easy part of the job. So definitely want to say thank you for the work that you all are doing, and look forward to continuing to partner. And thank you all for recognizing us.
All right. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking time to talk with me today. And I look forward to seeing you at the luncheon on May the 2nd, and even this afternoon at the reception.
I
So,
will see you at both.
all
Take care.
right. Thank
Thank
you. I'm
you.
gonna stop the recording.